Welcome back to True Story with John Gibson. Today's guest is iconic broadcaster Mike Goldberg.
John, thank you very much. You are hopefully staying warm in Chicago, and I'm going to do this for you just to get us in the mood. And now, the starting lineup for your Chicago Bulls. Oh, Ray Clay. I mean, it was epic.
You just gave me a bucket list moment. I didn't even know it was coming.
All we need is, you thought I was going to do a Here We Go, right? We need Serious by Alan Parsons. And from North Carolina, number 23, Michael Jordan.
Boom.
It was the
Chills.
best. Chills. The best. I'm not always on time. I've gotten better over time.
Yes.
But I will say, I never miss the starting introductions from Ray Clay at the old barn, the Madhouse on Madison, or across the street in the house that Michael built, because they start playing that serious, and from Pax to Pip, then a man in the middle from San Francisco, 7'1", Bill Cartwright.
Man, it's
it was awesome. It was awesome.
It's so funny that it's not funny, it's actually amazing, because just right there, your own enthusiasm, and it's like these are things that they're not contrived, they're so real, and you're such a real, not only are you an iconic broadcaster, but you're such a sports fan, and I don't know that people really know this about you, but let's just start there, man. Can we share a little bit about maybe your hockey background, and then we'll kind of parallel that into kind of some of the broadcasting stuff? But you have such a diverse background, I don't think people are aware of.
Well, the short story and the true story, and yes, that was a pun intended, is that I knew nothing about MMA when I got started. It was through my connections at the network and ESPN. I didn't wrestle growing up. I was friends with a bunch of wrestlers. I saw how hard they would compete. I saw them running around in garbage bags.
Right.
I was like, damn, they're still running. And I was a high-level hockey player. Our team in the west side of Cleveland, North Olmsted, was very successful. Played on some all-star teams. Played on the first American team to travel to Vancouver, British Columbia, and play in one of their big tournaments.
Wow.
We win game one, John, 3-1. And I'm like, and I scored one of the goals. I'm like, to these Canucks, whatever. And found out later it was the North Vancouver B team. After that, we did not score another goal. We got beat by Burnaby Winter Club 14-0. One of the players on Burnaby Winter Club, Cliff Ronning.
Oh, wow.
And Cliffy was in Minnesota when I was broadcasting.
Wow.
So to bring it back into a nutshell, I'm a hockey player. My DNA is all about hockey. Tom Ferguson, the legendary head wrestling coach at St. Edward's High School for a long time, actually invited some of us North Olmsted guys to train in his basement. Right when this is pre John Gibson birth, but when Nautilus was designed by Tom
Nautilus,
Sure.
There you go. Been born.
There you go. Fair enough. I'm dating myself and complimenting you on the process.
Sure.
And we would go down, but then there was that one room with all the mats, and I'm like, a couple of times, whoever it was my age who was the wrestling star at Ed's, like, come on in. Well, no interest. Don't want to. And so my head coach, the guy who raised me, not take anything away from my father, but the guy who raised me on the ice, the man who injected my DNA and taught me how to treat people, taught me how to win, taught me how to lose, humbled me on every occasion. Back then, it was I either got yelled at, screamed at, or shouted at. There was no other tone. There was no
just the degree of that.
Yeah, it was one of those 3 degrees.
Yeah.
But I always had to remember, as I got older and I got into coaching, I really understood that the reality of it is when the coach stops talking to you in whatever tone it is, that's when you have a problem.
Sure.
Because that's when he has given up. My coach, Ian Cushton, passed away a couple of years ago, was on the 1958 Montreal Canadiens Stanley Cup championship team.
Wow.
He's my hero. He's my hero.
Wow.
And he built the man that I am today, and many others. His son was our babysitter, taught us how to fake sleep when mom and dad would get home. But my DNA comes from a guy who won a Stanley Cup during the original 6 days. And Crash was so humble. He'd never talk about it. And he would say, Johnny B, well, I wasn't into the bench guy. And I'm doing the math. Okay, well, let's say there's 20 guys on each roster and there's 6 teams. I know the Europeans aren't here yet, but that's the end of the bench of 120 players in North America and the world.
Right.
Coach, that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. You're there. So I grew up playing hockey, played a ton of hockey, played at Miami of Ohio, played some soccer, was a keeper in soccer, had a choice to go to West Point for soccer and hockey. And then, believe it or not, right at the end of the process, I had the congressional nomination, everything. I have asthma, or had it more, it was more concerning at that point. And mom's there. I'm a senior in high school. We start reading about what the plebes go through, which is what the plebes go through. Yeah. And my mom said, you got to tell me you have asthma. And boom, I was out, medically disqualified. But two things. First of all, you understand it because they're getting that 0.0001. And it wasn't an insult to me. It was that they had a guy very similar to me, or 100 of them that didn't have asthma. Sure. And secondly, in the big picture, as much as I was proud to potentially represent my country and in that fashion, it wasn't the path that had been chosen for me beforehand. I was already doing some performing with singing and stuff. And so ended up going to Miami of Ohio, same 4 years as Ron Harper, and played there for a couple of years, and then interned at Channel 5 in Cincinnati. And that was during Pete's run for Ty Cobb's record. Okay. Chase, they called it on Channel 5, the Countdown to Cobb. Wow. And I was there as my father. I got him in. He watched Pete at Crosley, Cincinnati native, born and raised. Yeah. September 11th, 1985, on a 2-1 pitch from Eric Shaw, 8:01 p.m. Boom. I remember it like yesterday. Man, your memory's amazing. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, those were the early ones. I mean, those were the early ones in my career because I was still a producer, then got my first job down in Sarasota, and then advanced towards Sports Channel Chicago. Wow. And that's when you would remember when we were kind of coming into fruition and the Bulls got good. Yeah. They were okay. Then they got into those Pistons series and then they were good. And so we had a budget for a sideline guy. Well, Goldie became the sideline guy. Wow. Cashel and Bandelier were in the studio. Tom Dorr, I am Tom Dorr, Big Johnny Red Kerr, and they would go to me as the sideline guy. Ahmad Rashad once said to me, like, I said, man, Ahmad, nice to see you. Like, you could take my seat because I always had that seat. He's like, no, this is your home. I'm like, Ahmad, okay, seriously. He goes, dude, you're the Ahmad Rashad of the Bulls. I'm like, okay, well, you know, this is twisted around a little bit, but thank you. But that's the seat I had. That's the seat I had. I was there when Starks jammed over him. I got a great interview when Michael came back from Atlantic City. Oh, wow. I saw the struggles. I saw him jump up on the table when they won their first at home at the Chicago Stadium, the Madhouse on Madison. Wow. Unbelievable early parts. Unbelievable early parts, John. Wow. And hockey is, like I said, my DNA. And you being a wrestler, sure, you know what it's like to sacrifice. You know what team is about. And you know the mindset of a hockey player keeping it in the room. I have always said it has been so simple for me to relate to MMA fighters because the DNA is either much like yourself, the humble wrestler, or it's some form in wrestling as a martial art, needless to say, but it's some other form of martial art where you're taught to say yes or no, sir. Right. So my ability to relate to the fighters and their preparation, and they beat the shit out of, they say a lot of mean things, they beat the shit out of each other, then they shake hands. Right. That's a hockey playoff series that ends in handshakes. All day. So it was a good background for me to have. And Bruce Connell, may he rest in peace, who got me involved and was my producer for 20 years. Brucey was a big hockey guy. Wow. And we were doing the Red Wings together, and that's when Brucey said, hey, Bruce Beck can't freelance anymore. You should try this out. All I heard was Japan. And after that, we were hooked. Did you, and I can't wait to get there with the UFC and all of that, but and we certainly will, but did you have in the, I guess, this portion of your life that we're discussing right now, did you have moments when you're like working, you know, with the NHL or doing the Detroits or any of these things where you thought you had already made it? Were you like, man, I'm living the dream? And like, I mean, the rest of the story gets so much bigger, but did you have that early on and felt like I'm living what I've always wanted to do? Yeah. Wow. Humbly, yes. There were seminal moments. Sports Channel Chicago. All of a sudden, going from my first job in Sarasota and coming up to your home the number 3 market,
huge market,
arguably the best sports market in the country.
Yeah.
If tied for 1 with a couple others, but
sure.
I was there during the heyday of the Bulls. I was there when the Blackhawks, played Pittsburgh, got swept, but the Blackhawks were outstanding with Chelios and Roenick and Amonte and Eddie DeEagle and Gary Suter and Dirk Graham and Steve Thomas. And so I was there. The Bears. I did a show way back when called Bears 85 with Dan Hampton.
Wow.
And it was a studio show where we had like John Howell and the Bad Habits. We had like a live band. So I was like almost like a Letterman at the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was one moment. And then when Raycom hired me to do Big Ten basketball, I did the Illinois package. Well, I had done some pregame work for Indiana, but my first play-by-play was outside of like the MAC and outside of the MidCon, which I always, they were as important as anything. They were my building blocks. When Raycom made the call, and I was with Doug Altenberger going down to Champaign and doing all the Illini games. Raycom Big Ten basketball. Greg Kelser was one of my partners. Steve Yoder, the old Wisconsin coach. I knew I had made another step. And then Prime Network football. And the ultimate wow was when I got hired by ESPN in 1994. Yeah. And the crazy part is, John, is much of a hockey guy as I am, I had never called a minor league hockey game. I had called college, I had called IHL, but I didn't take that track. I wasn't in Adirondack or somewhere like that, and then got the Wings job like Dave Strader, who we lost also way too young. I started my first ever NHL game on the network, with my hockey broadcast hero, Bill Clement. Wow. Anaheim at San Jose. Quick funny story. So I go in, I'm just the rookie. I go in morning skate. You go and I'm just following Billy around. I'm just listening to what people are saying. We go into Ron Wilson's office. Ron Wilson was the coach of the Ducks at the time. And I had this jacket, NHL jacket, that was my baby. And I left it in there. And as we walk back to the Hotel De Anza, which is, it's from here to the corner, very close. Yeah. I get into my room, and then Billy calls me and he goes, "Hey, reach in your pocket of your jacket." I reach in my pocket and there's like 10 condoms. They were in the wrapper still. Okay. 10 condoms and I'm like, and Billy goes, "Coach Wilson said, hey, Rook, don't leave your jacket in the coach's room." And I was like, oh, that's awesome. That was awesome. It was so funny. Yeah. Ron Wilson probably said to Billy, Who is this kid? He left his jacket right here? Oh, I got a present for him. And he flipped them in there. Yeah. And then ESPN was one of those moments you're talking about where I made it to the network, did a lot of different sports. Even though eventually my NFL on Fox went quite opposite and heartbreaking in many ways, I worked my way through it. I did a ton of big college football for Prime Network. I did NFL Europe, all those things. But it was in 1997 when Bruce Beck could no longer freelance. And I was doing hockey, and Bruce Connell was one of the hockey producers. Bruce's father, Scotty, is on the Mount Rushmore of ESPN. He was one of the founding fathers. And Brucey said, and I always do it the way he did, Goldie, I got a gig for you. It's in Japan. They'll pay you this. You gotta take a jiu-jitsu class. And we were off and running. And that was the SEG days, John. So I didn't know where it was headed, not sure, didn't know anything about it. But I was an enthusiastic broadcaster who could tell stories. And my partner was the Olympic gold medalist, Jeff Blatnick. Right. So I let Blatz do his thing.
Yeah, who was just such a hero in the wrestling community and just a pioneer and
cancer survivor.
Just cancer survivor and calm man, but like gentle giant. He was a man that had a reputation preceded him, you know? Yeah. And, great man. But it was really interesting as a fan because again, this is, the SEG days, right? Pre-Zuffa era. And when Zuffa came in, obviously they rebranded, things shifted. But for a fan like me who had to really struggle to keep up, we're talking videotapes and message boards.
Oh, yeah.
You were kind of continuity for me. You were still there, and there was sort of some revolving doors, Frank Shamrock and some other people. But ultimately you were my figurehead, and you could tell a story and provide a background and 30 seconds or less as a fighter's approaching a cage in some of those smaller venues back in the day, I could learn, okay, I'm rooting for this guy or this guy, because you were able to provide 3 details about them, you know, and that narrative was huge. It was huge foundation. And what was it like? This is going to be such a generic question, but man, you're
talking to the guy who said progeny and precision is precise. You can't tell me any kind of derelict. You're good. You're good.
You know, but you're smooth as silk. The thing is, you're going to have a couple whiffs at 2 million at bats or 10 million at bats.
That's what I always say. By the way, I say if my blooper reel is only 15 to 20 minutes long, and I was on the air 15 to 20 million minutes, I'm a Hall of Famer. But I still laugh because. It's always I laugh at those now. Where before I'd be like, hey, you know, I'm a human being, and now I sit back and I just made fun of myself doing it. Right?
The internet is a cruel place sometimes, man. I did one. Hey, been there, done that, man. I counted the hard end of criticism once, and I couldn't handle it. I took it down, man. I understand. But you are. I mean, you are the Mount Rushmore, in my opinion. It's just crazy.
Thank you.
And you're certainly, man, you were always well prepared, well spoken. You had awesome catchphrases. You know, you kept us entertained. But again, by providing those narratives, you know, it helped us understand why we needed to care. And the fighters did the rest from there and kind of showed us. But I was just, as a fan, nostalgic over the holiday, the Christmas holiday. I checked out GSP's debut and Nick Diaz's debut. Wow. And it was you, man. And you narrated both and you're commentating. And I'm like, in anticipation for this conversation, just like, this guy got to see that. He got to be the soundtrack to a Chuck Liddell. Of these people, beginning to end. What was that like?
Chuck backpedaling, knocking out Babalu.
Man, yes, exactly.
Tito walking in with that epic walk-in right after 9/11.
Yes.
You know, Randy coming back and beating Tim Sylvia in Columbus, 08.
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You just said a few things that go back to my hockey DNA, John. And the first and foremost and most important to me is preparation. And preparation is representing the fighters, right? Bill Clement, he's my idol. He took me under his wing. He said, Goldie, here's the deal. Always be prepared. If you leave a bunch of it on the table, that's okay. It means the game went in a different direction. He said, study, study, study. When you think you've studied enough, study another half hour. And then push it aside. Because after that, it's going to boggle up in your brain. And that's a little bit what happened with the NFL, but it is what it is. I made a mistake. And I still got to do one, but it's one where really what cost me was social media. And what upset me, John, was when one person said, do a little prep, do a little homework. I knew I had a shit game. I knew I was all over the place. Hadn't done football in a long time, over prepared. But don't question my, work ethic. Right. So that part of it gave you those first steps towards the cage. And I have always said, and will continue to say, I don't care if it's Michael Bisping's 21st fight or John Gibson's first entrance into the octagon. You have worked your ass off for years. You have sacrificed. And so it would be the cruelest insult and the lack of integrity on my part to say, I don't know much about this guy. So I studied just as hard on the new guys, and to have you say in that short walk, I gave you a little background on him means the world to me, because that was it. So that's the first part of my philosophy. It's F and F. So that's the fans. That would be the fighters. I'm giving their backstory. Then when they get into the cage, enthusiasm, the things that you talked about, that's the fans and the fighters. But I can't tell you how many fighters have come up to me and said, bam, 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 boom, 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 boom. Thanks for getting that right. Thanks for mentioning that. Man, you reminded me of things I didn't even remember doing. And a lot of hard work. That's the stuff you don't see like you as a wrestler. That's the weight cuts and, the stuff in the gym and, are your ears going to be bad or not? Are you going to wear headgear or not?
Right.
That was my work for the UFC and for any gig that I did. And, when you echo what you just said, it means that I did enough and I did it right.
You did a wonderful job. Your legacy. I mean, and I think people need to not take for granted the fact that 90% or more of what we saw was you live. You know, you did a lot of pre-tape, you did a lot of content for Spike and other things, for example, but you were live, fight nights, these are pay-per-views, and these are things that could have been chopped up and mass-produced later, but this is red light go time for you. So, I mean, the amount of probably pressure I imagine that would bring anybody, and the fact that you were able to do that and perform so well for so long is a huge testament to your skill. You're the best. Like, you're really one of the best, if not the best.
Thank you. We just did, I'm with BYB Extreme now. Bare knuckle boxing. It's Dada's group. It's the real triangular surface, because that triad that Triller did really was a copyright infringement of our Trigon. Yeah. I'm sure you read a little bit of it. Yeah. But I got hired by BYB Extreme last year. My broadcast partner is Paulie Maldonado. Paulie's a network guy. So Paulie Maldonado, Benny Ricardo works with us. And I just had an interesting Madden conversation with Benny being such a football guy. And then we've had Al Bernstein at the desk. I met Al. Claudia Trejos, who's done a ton of boxing throughout her career, most of it Univision and in Telemundo, but she's at every big fight. Yeah. We've got a great team. And working with Paulie is a blast. And it reminds me of the dynamic I had with Joe. Really? He gets all excited, you know, and I sit back and I listen, and he's so good. And Rogan has talked about how good he believes Paulie is as a boxing analyst. I have a new job that's going to start in a couple of weeks. ProBox TV is creating their own platform. And Paulie said, hey, we could get Mike Goldberg. Thankfully, the guys in charge were excited. So I'm going to be with Paulie, Antonio Tarver, and Roy Jones Jr.
Wow. Man.
That's what I said.
Wow. We're talking Hall of Famer. Man, I love all these guys, and Hall of Famer probably.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, my boss, John Piper, John says, he goes, it's like a Marvel team. Yeah. I go, all right, I appreciate that, John, but I'm Ant-Man amongst these guys. He's like, but you're in the movie. I go, all right, but I just want you to make sure that I'm Ant-Man. No, you're not. But yeah, I mean, I'm just like in heaven to work with Hall of Fame guys like Roy, Antonio, and my buddy Paulie, and he's quickly become my buddy. We're going to do a lot of work together in 22. So that part of it, and the relationships are really what matter the most. And but the fighters and the fans, that's what I wanted to do. Represent the fighters and the fans. I'm at a New Year's Eve party just a couple of days ago at my master's house, Master McGowan, Paul McGowan, who I've trained with for years. And his jiu-jitsu coach is a girl named Lindsay Van Zant with a D, DT. And a couple cocktails. We were Ubering, had my Jameson, my Irish side, my mom's side. Yeah. And Lindsay, Master starts going, and she fought in Bellator. I have probably 4,000 bios that still are on my computer. I go through, I go, when was it? Pull up on my phone, John, Lindsay's bio. Oh, you're from upstate New York. Whoa. Yeah, and then there was one fight where she said, only one went the distance. She said, yeah, but she tapped in the second, and somehow the rest but she was blown away by all the info I had on her. I met her at a random party. Yeah. And just back to my point about homework.
I mean, certainly I feel like it must be at this point just instinct for you. You've done this so long, and and it's so cool to hear that you're part of this team now, because you get to utilize all these talents and not only feature these fighters, but also for us fight fans. Like, I can never get enough content. Like, bring it. I love it all.
Yes.
And I didn't know that I would always feel that way. Like, I got into bare knuckle boxing because Chris Lieben, he's been on the show a few times, and he was like, just watch, man. Dude. And I watched, and I got it. I was like, okay.
Who was better to be in there than Chris Lieben?
No one.
I mean, come on. No one. Chael still talks about the foot stomps in practice.
Oh, my God.
He's like, all of a sudden, he foot stomped me. I go, what'd you do? I foot stomped him back. That was a dick move. I did it back to him. I love the crippler with it. And the one that will be remembered the most in the UFC was Anderson's debut against Chris. He was on the wrong side of it. But Chris always came, man. And
Yes.
we're watching him in bare knuckle. I saw Joey Beltran at one of our events.
Yeah.
And I said, Mexicutioner, what's up? And I mean, he was always a badass. He goes, Goldie, here's the deal. I don't have to worry about my legs anymore. I don't have to worry about getting kicked or taken down. And they told me I can punch in the clinch. This shit's fun. But that's why you're the champion, because you're built for it.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, BKFC has done a great job, and the more success they have, the more success we have, the more success the sport has. Yeah. We've actually partnered with BKB in the UK, and they're sending a couple of our fighters over there in a week or so.
Oh, cool.
One of their champions, Barry Jones, was at our last show and won by knockout in like 5 seconds. Like he just came in and smoked the dude. It's a lot of fun. It's fun. It's different because there are boxing elements. And so I am learning from Paulie.
I bet.
And I am taking it very seriously. As it's not tough, man. Sometimes it is swing. But the reality of it is you can see the levels, John, changing. And you see this footwork that different guys are able to use and utilize, and especially in a surface that's 22 by 22 by 22.
Right.
I absolutely love it. And I get to say it's all over just like that pretty much every fight.
Which is
pretty much every fight. Exactly. Who doesn't want the highlight reel finish?
Exactly.
And I get a lot of those at BYB. And so I'm glad you've been watching it. It's the oldest form of combat sports, but it's the biggest thing right now. And I just hope all the organizations, ourselves included, can get the right sponsors and the right support, and for people to understand that a combat fan like yourself gets it and loves it and understands it, not just for the finishes, but for the art and the technique that's being utilized. And I will add one thing, and we've talked about it. It can get bloody in there. Yeah. But over the last 2 decades, when people started getting some open cuts, especially head wounds, as you know, in the UFC, a lot of people are, whoa, you know, and then it's not always the greatest visual, but people started to understand in between rounds when they go put the inswell that the cut was open, but it was only that big. Still sucked, but it was that big. Right. And my point is with bare knuckle, I think combat fans in general are a little bit more accustomed or a little bit more accepting and understanding of when a cut opens and there's some bloodshed. It doesn't go right back to human cockfighting, which at one point it was.
Exactly right.
Senator McCain was right. He was, God rest his soul. He was right at that time. But that helps the bare knuckle world and the blood that comes with it, because we've seen it so much, not just in the UFC and Bellator and one. We've seen it in MMA for over 2 decades now.
Right. I agree with everything you said. And the irony is it's exactly to your point. It's nowhere near as vicious as the NHB days back when I was a new fan and like trying to advocate, no, trust me, it's not as bad as you think. When one could argue now bare knuckle is far safer for some of the reasons you said. People are not cutting weight, they're not doing leg kicks, there's no sprawling. It's a lot of traditional boxing, but with great defense mechanisms. And I do think that the fans are growing a little bit more accustomed to the fact that this is boxing, and you know, there's prior cuts, there's scar tissue, things are going to open up. It's soft tissue, you know. I
mean, Nick Diaz is. I mean, you could like shake Nick's hand and he would start bleeding.
Great.
He had so much scar tissue at one point.
Yeah.
I got a funny Nick Diaz story about that. But also, you have to look at, you know, fighter safety. Right. And the UFC and mixed martial arts is safer than boxing as a whole. The gloves were designed to protect the fighter's hands, not the opponent's head. Paulie will tell you, he's a 2-time world champion. Al will tell you, he's been doing boxing forever. That's where the damage happens. Yeah. In bare knuckle, you don't take a lot of those. Much like the smaller gloves in MMA. Yeah. You get smoked, might take 2 or 3 in MMA, might only take 1. Yes. In bare knuckle, which looks nasty, feels nasty, but in the big picture is much safer for the fighter. You'd rather get boom, down and out, done, wake up and go. Yes. Like I always said, if you're gonna lose, get choked out. That's probably the best way to be in a healthy form.
Yeah,
the safest. The armbar, you're still going to tweak something, even if you tap quick. The different submission moves. You don't want Husamal Parhalas, tweaking your knee.
Anything,
you know that.
grabbing anything.
And I remember Uriah and Jose, and Uriah he's way too freaking tough in that fight.
Oh, man.
Randy had to do 4 months of physical therapy after the Pedro Hizzo fight because of all those kicks they
legs.
took.
Yeah.
Just nasty. And you know it all because you've trained it. You know what Gips does to your body and the joints.
Right. Sure.
It's nasty. It's nasty. And so in that regard, it is a safer sport, and people are starting to understand that over the years. Mm-hmm. So Nick Diaz, with all that scar tissue, he was starting to lose fights, John, because of cuts, not because of the performance.
Right.
So there's a plastic surgeon, big fan, really good friends with Phil Baroni in Las Vegas. His name is Frank Style. Mm-hmm. I got to know Frank a little bit. Very cool dude. And Frank, such a big fan, he did this elaborate surgery on Nick. Didn't charge him a dime.
Awesome.
He went in, he shaved all the bone because he had, chips in the bone.
Yeah.
Took out all the scar tissue.
Wow.
Did about 6 sets internally of stitches. Boom, 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 boom. Probably a $30,000 procedure if you were walking off the street.
Sure.
But what it was supposed to do was, more than anything, the scar tissue, it was how that bone was all chipped right there.
Yeah.
And it would puncture it. Nick would bleed, and they'd stop the fight, and Nick would go, wait, what's going on?
Yeah.
About 3 or 4 weeks into recovery, Nick being Nick, took his own stitches out.
Oh.
the internal ones as well.
Oh.
It healed, but it looks like somebody put his eyebrows like right up here through a meat grinder.
Man.
And it was just such a typical Nick move. It was awesome. I remember one time Nick Diaz said to me, Goldie, every time I fight, they go to Stockton and they show all the graffiti and they show where I grew up. It's a rough place. I know that. He goes, I haven't lived there in 10 years. I have a really nice house now. And I just started cracking up, John. I'm like, I go, that's funny. I go, but you do know, Nick, that's a boring story. Right. I know, but come on, dude, it's the same shot.
Yeah,
like it's the Max Holloway shot, on his part of the island. It's the ghetto. Yeah. But it was so funny when you said that. I don't even live there anymore. I have a really nice house. You were the Diaz brothers. And I remember when Nathan was coming up, because I said something about Nate, and Nick goes, we all call him Nathan. And I said, you proud of him? He's like, Goldie, come on. It's kind of Anthony and Sergio. And he did say at the time, he goes, he'll be better than me.
Awesome.
Little bros, he'll be better than me. And Nick's pretty badass. Yeah. But he said Nathan will tear it up. And obviously they're both legends.
Both legends. And I love their relationship and the dynamic of how supportive he's always been to his younger brother.
Absolutely.
And as somebody, I was a Nick fan first. Yeah. Still a Nick fan, but I was a Nick fan first. And I remember when Nate came into the UFC, I wasn't really necessarily rooting for him because I was like, come on, there's only room for one. Like I almost in a way, I was trying to be a loyal in a way, which is silly. And Nate, I'm a huge Nate fan now. Like all these years later, I will root for Nate over anyone.
Was the seminal moment when he had the triangle locked in? He shot the birds.
It had to be.
Like you said, it was like he's got it. I go, and he's doing a Top Gun scene right now. Communicating.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. But I agree with you, and the same dynamic exists in Anthony and Sergio Pettis. Mm-hmm. And I first saw Sergio fight as an amateur at 16 years old.
Wow.
We were in Milwaukee. It was like a 125th anniversary of Harley. Did a big show in Milwaukee. Serge happened to have an amateur fight. 16 years old. I want to say it might have been boxing or Muay Thai. I think it was Muay Thai. Mm. And it was at a Harley Davidson dealership. And I went with Delagrati and I said something to Anthony long ago, but I've said it to Serge again. I go, you remember? He goes, of course I remember you were there.
Wow.
And not when he just won the title, but when he pulled off that great finish in a fight he was losing to Horiguchi, I texted Showtime right away. I'm like, damn! He goes, Goldie, So he's in a big brother fashion. He is more excited about his brother's success than he is about his own. And last time I checked, both Nick Diaz and Anthony Pettis had a ton of success of their own.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Legends. Yeah. They both left their mark forever, for sure.
No question. And really the best thing, and it's not because of the opponents, but a good thing for Sergio was going to Bellator, because Nick seemed to be able to live in the shadow of Nick or Nate and Nick. Yeah. Where Sergio always seemed to, maybe because he was younger when he came in, less accomplished, went 500, but it was always like, oh, it's just his little brother. And once he went to Bellator and started to establish himself on his own platform, now people talk about Anthony Pettis and Sergio Pettis, and they put a comma in the middle. Yes. And it makes me very happy for Serge, because I know the sacrifices the kid has made. They're the same as his brother, if not more so. Yes, absolutely. Been with Duke Rufus since he was 10 years old. So it's a great story. Great story.
Yeah, and it's as you say that, I think to myself too, man, I think I like Sergio more than ever, because I feel like I underappreciate the fact of how much more difficult it had to have been for him to choose his brother's sport and go behind him, especially as his brother became a world champ.
No question. Ryan Couture. I remember asking Randy with Ryan, I go, dude, your son's going in there. Are you worried about him? And Randy just straight out said he can handle himself. And Ryan didn't have the type of success that his father did, and no bad on him. Ryan's a class act, now runs Extreme Couture. He's got a great family. He's a great human being, and he had some really, really good wins. He's different than his dad, though. He was more true jiu-jitsu, submission-based, where Randy had that element of dirty boxing. Yes. And had more Greco than Ryan. But Randy said, no, Goldie, I watch him every day. He can handle himself. He'll be fine. When I did get a chance to talk to Glenn Carano at a Bellator, I asked him about his baby girl competing, and his answer was a little bit different. And I think you would probably know that Glenn Carano was Roger Staubach's backup.
Yeah, he was he's
a stud,
Cowboys, right? Yeah,
exactly. And he goes, yeah, I hated it every single time. And I said, I got a daughter not quite Gina's age. I go, I don't know how you did it, Glenn. And he looks at me and smiles. He goes, Goldie, I don't know how I did it either, but I'm glad she's in movies now. It's way better.
Yes. I know. I mean, as a father, and I have a 12-year-old daughter. I can't imagine. But hey, people, men or women, some people are just wired fighters. It's who they are. Yeah. You know better than I'll ever know. And that's who they are. And it's like I'm so appreciative that there's things like bare knuckle boxing, UFC, Bellator, all of these things now that exist, because 25 years ago, not really, there was some HB stuff, There was nowhere for wrestlers to go. Nowhere. Yeah. There was nowhere for the first female in U.S. history to medal in judo at the Olympics. She was living out of her car with her bronze medal 6 months later. I know. Crazy. There was nowhere to go. I know. Nowhere to go. Until the WNBA, there was nowhere to go for the highest level women basketball players who might have won 4 straight national championships at UConn. It gave the wrestler a place to truly compete and make a living. And that was the real key back when it started, is you had a place to go other than the WWE. Right. You had a place where you could continue to do what you love. And if it's someone like Randy, he would say, compete. Right. Compete. When I don't like, Randy would always say, when I am not enthused to come to the gym anymore, that's when because I got to train. Wow. When training is something I don't want to do, then I can't go out there and fake it and compete. Yeah. But it was, for many people, it wasn't a fight. It is a fight. It's competition. Whereas BJ Penn once told me, and I love this one, it's confrontation. I'm like, oh, right, interesting. My guy, the prodigy, right? BJ is one of my all-time favorites. He goes, Goldie, comrade. He goes, first of all, I say comrade because we're this. Yeah. And he goes, it's confrontation. So I started overusing that on the air shortly thereafter. No, I like it. I like that.
Yeah.
Again, these are all icons that you've seen the prodigy emerge and peak and all of these people and stuff. Is there a special moment for you? Was it like, I don't know, was it GSP, Jake Shields in Canada? Was it any special moment to you where you were just like, this is exhilarating. This has grown, you know, so far above maybe what we could have imagined?
80,000 at Sky Dome in Toronto.
Toronto? Yeah.
Yeah. And GSP was the headliner.
Mhm.
Mark Hominick, Jose Aldo, days before Mark's wife gave birth to their first child. And as a dad, I kept thinking, oh, that hematoma, these pictures are going to suck with this newborn, man.
Was that
like,
that fight? I remember that.
Yes,
Oh.
yes. And all I could think of, and Mark's a good Canadian boy, right up the street, trained with Sammy Stout, obviously trained with the late Sean Tompkins.
I remember him.
He was one of my guys. I love him.
Really? He was nice.
And I love Jose Aldo, though, too. Jose Aldo is one
Jose's awesome.
badass. Like, at times, I'm glad he's come back and had some wins.
Yes.
Because people started looking at his career in a 16-second segment when Conor knocked him out.
I know.
And that's
so
not
unfair.
Right. So unfair. Because he's still the most dominant champion, or I guess I'd have to do the modern math, but he's as dominant a champion as we've ever had, and especially at 145.
Yeah.
So, and then GSP, but 80,000 people, John, at Sky Dome, and it'll always be Sky Dome to me. I had done the CFL there. I did White Sox stuff back in the day at Sports Channel Chicago, Hawk and Wimpy, and my nickname was Spike back then. And so they, you know, we come out of break, and you know, other highlights around the league, back to Hawk and Wimpy. Spiker, thank you very much. I was just like, well, the Hawkey's calling me Spiker. You can put her on the board, yes.
Amazing.
So Wimpy and I are up in Toronto, covering the ALCS, the whole Joe Card, everything, the Wild thing, but it was amazing. So for me to go there as a hockey player as well, who had been there many times playing hockey, and see 80,000 people in one building for a UFC, that was one of those, holy crap. As I went like this, like Joe and I kept looking up like, what is going on? Now, for me, who has to go to the bathroom frequently, that part was not a bonus because it was way far away.
Get the golf cart.
But yeah, get going. Like everybody knew if somebody walked in and I wasn't talking during a pay-per-view, that meant I ran to the bathroom.
Yeah.
But that was one of those moments where I really went, wow, this is crazy. And then going places overseas, seeing the passion, having people in other countries say, "You're a fucking legend." I'm like, wow. Like, you know who I am? Yeah. But more appropriately, not me, to answer your question, John, that's the one that really pops up, is the first big one when we had 80,000 at Sky Dome. And Columbus and Randy and Tim will always be very special to me because I'm from Ohio. I was born in Cincinnati, raised in Cleveland, had all my family and friends at that one. My first ever fight, as you know, Ultimate Japan, Randy won the belt, beating Maurice Smith. My 100th UFC 91, I got the poster right there. Randy and Brock. That was my 100th, and it had Randy.
That's amazing.
Now my guy Randy's in Columbus. He's not supposed to win again. Like, Tim was on a roll. Yeah. He had beaten Arlovsky. I didn't think he was going to beat him once, yet alone twice.
The standoff was like,
yeah, I know. And I got now, if you listen to it, they edited it, but I had a clock promo right off, boom. And if you remember, Randy came right out and changed the fight immediately. Yeah. And I was still talking about like Nylabone dog chews or something. And I and Joe's like, ah!
Yeah.
But we have, we got to pay the bills.
Yes. Man, it's amazing time too. Back then, it was so interesting too from just a marketing and advertising perspective how far it's come too, because we're talking like Condom Depot and all sorts of crazy things.
That's exactly what we had back then. Yeah. And I didn't make up Nylabone dog chews. Sometime I swear to God, there was a time during the SEG era that Nylabone dog chews were like in the billboards.
Well, I'm glad we had their support.
I don't know how much they paid Myro, but at least they were paying something. They probably kept us afloat. Yeah. but it was pretty crazy. I remember, and you were very complimentary before we got started about how you've talked to many fighters, and when they're fighting, it's different for fighters because when they're in the public eye, it's fight week. Correct. So they can't really be in the public eye. So the expos and that's when people can embrace them. With my job, I was at every show. I called every fight, and I did have time to stop. I wasn't cutting weight. I didn't have to hide and go get my meal in my sleep. I was able to interact with the fans. Tim Sylvia is sitting in this bar in Columbus in the back. It was the week of the fight. We were honoring a Buckeye, Ray Mendoza, Marine, who lost his life in battle for our nation. And Tim said something just off the cuff, and Tim and I used to always pick on each other. He'd be like, Goldie, why does anybody want a picture with you? Why did they want your autograph? And I just started laughing because that's Tim. And he wasn't being a dick. He was just being Tim. And I go, how many times do you fight a year? Oh, no, 3 or 4. How often are you out there during fight week? Never. I go, how many fights do I call a year? And he looks at me and goes, that's a really good point. And that was that. Yeah. And if I really had my wit hat on that night, John, I would have said, Tim, would you like a picture? That's what I should have said. But it was really funny when you said that. How many times? Well, I do about 20 a year. That's a good point.
When you finally got off that train, was there a time of just decompression? I mean, that pace had to be overwhelming, right?
It really was. And for many, many years, while the UFC was growing, I continued to do a lot of other things. I was in the college football studio for Fox for 6 years, working for George Greenberg. I
like 2005 or something.
Sports. Yeah, up until your math is perfect. Up until about 2005, when we were going to do enough UFCs that I could make a living doing the UFC and focusing on that.
Wow.
And vice versa, I could not keep commitments to other places. Like I was doing the Minnesota Wild. I was their first announcer. Wow. It was one of the greatest jobs in the world. I did hockey in Detroit. Now I'm doing hockey in Minnesota.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do it anymore because I was going to have to miss too many games. It wasn't fair to the Wild. But the UFC was in a different place and headed to a much different place. But it was heartbreaking that I had to stop doing hockey. Went to the network, did ACC, Sunday Night Hoops, and AVP Beach Volleyball. But it was an exhausting pace with the prep. But I always knew that every opportunity was a blessing.
Right.
And you got to take it that way. And the decompression was good for a day or two, and then I missed it. Ironically, the first fight after my final UFC, UFC 207 with Ronda and with Amanda, was in Phoenix. And that's the famous one where you see me in the stands. And that was a fluke. That was a fluke. They didn't do that. I thought the camera was pointed at me during a commercial, and I was saying, what up to the guys in the truck? So I go, BJ came and trained at my buddy's place. I go to cheer on my buddy, Baby J, who got destroyed that night, but that's okay. Yeah. And I'm in the stands, and I'm like, do this, and it gets on the air. And the bat phone from Dana rings in the truck because Anthony Giordano, our director, said like they were going to fire him on the spot. Like, what the? You have a shot of Goldie? And Anthony's like, I did not know he was there. I said, get me some crowd. I did not. Goldie was sitting in a suite. And I was, but the last few fights I came down because I wanted to be closer for BJ's fight. Yeah. I asked these dudes, you mind if I sit here? They're like, yeah, whatever. Then they look back like, whoa, somebody a beer? Yeah. So that was such a humbling and just heartwarming moment as I did walk around. I didn't try to make a lap of fame, but man, did I get like love. And we used to, get a lot of attention, but they, a lot of people disagreed with the decision, which is neither here nor there. But again, going back to what we said earlier, the fans, if the fans are telling me this, then regardless of what happens in the world of business, I can feel good about things.
Right. Well, as a fan and from a fan perspective, and I hardly ever say like I speak for everyone because I never do, but I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to take that carte blanche, and I'm going to say, certainly, man, I don't think we could ever give you enough love and express our appreciation enough. I mean, you were the soundtrack for so many of these people's stories and their arcs and stuff, and that is, it's fundamental to this whole sport and like lifestyle, this thing that I love. So it's so important, and your contribution is just it's gonna last forever. I mean, we're talking GSP's debut, so many people, you know.
Yeah, I mean, we were there during that growth, John, and as great as things may be in the future, your first date's always the best, right?
For sure, yeah.
And like, there'll never be another journey like Joe and I were on. There'll be a continued story and a great path and lots of great moments, but that journey will never exist again. Right. I believe I have a chance of it starting up in BYB Extreme, which is one of the reasons I'm so darn excited about it. So I've had a dozen people ask me, do you feel like it felt in the early days of the UFC? And I'm like, absolutely 100%.
Awesome.
So as I was able to step back and take a look at the forest and not just jammed in my next bio, I did realize that the best times were the journey, going to those places for the first time and staying a couple of days before or after and seeing the world through work. And I'm excited for the next journey. And if it's Pro Box, if it's BYB Extreme, if it's both and more, I'm excited to have the opportunity to take something and help cultivate it like I was blessed to do a couple of decades ago.
For sure. Yeah, I think it's super exciting. I'll watch both. I think it's great because you have so much to contribute to both of those organizations as well. So there's going to be some reciprocity there. You know, I think we all win. I really do. And the fighters, everybody will win. You know, it doesn't hurt to have a guy like you on their side doing some prep work. So
well, you know, like BYB Extreme said, you know, my boss, Mike Vasquez, he goes, dude, you instantly validate our product. And humbly, you know, with my background, there's some truth to that, but it just means more. He said it, I didn't say it. Right. You've obviously you've felt my hockey DNA come out many times in our visit. I'm not a pat me on the back, look at me. Hey. No. I know what I've achieved. I know what I can do. But no one will ever be less important than any other person. The janitor will always be as important as the CEO. So I was raised not just as a hockey player, but more importantly, by my mother and father. My mother at 78 years old and not moving so well would still smack me upside the head or try to grab one of those wooden spoons if she ever saw me be impolite to anybody at any time, any place. And she said something to me in Sarasota, Florida. It was my first job out of college, John. We were at a restaurant, Sarasota, a lot of blue hairs. This older woman came up, and I was like the 6 and 11 guy. I was like the Giordano back then. You know, I was Mark Giordano. Or I mean, my buddy Ryan, I did Illinois basketball with forever, and now he's been at CBS forever. Like, he's a stud, and I love that guy. So that was my job. This older woman comes up. Mom and I are eating some diner in between shows. She goes, "You're that new guy on Channel 40. Yes, ma'am. I like when you say, kiss that baby goodbye. I like when you do the highlights. You're doing a really nice job." And I said, "Well, thank you very much." And she walked away, and my mother said, "Here's the deal, son. You may meet one person, 10, 100, 10,000, 100,000, or many, many more. But each person will meet you once. And the impression you leave on them will be the impression they hold forever. And if you're kind, they'll probably share it with about a dozen people. And if you're not, they'll share it with hundreds." And I was already built that way, but it's a moment I can still like close my eyes and picture my mom. I was 21, 22 years old, John. My mom saying that because it was the first time in my life I got a little attention as a celebrity. I was on Channel 40. You know, small market, but somebody came up to me and said, "I watch you on TV and you do a good job."
What a cool story. Yeah,
it was great.
And your mom sounds wonderful. Awesome.
Yeah, she's a fiery Irish woman. And she's the ultimate hockey mom. She was 4 a.m. taking Todd and I to the rink. Never missed one of Cole's games. My son, who played at a very high level as well. Yeah, her boys are her life, and she's always taking care of her boys. And now we're at the point where we take care of her. It's like that picture you always see. You know, first time I had to do some personal grooming with my mother, I like was joking with her, like, Mom, 56 years ago, that I don't need to see any of that. And we're both laughing. This one's a clean one, but so when she still lived with me, she lived in Arcasita. We'd go over and give her insulin. Bing, bing, bang, it's over. One time I just lifted her shirt and I boom, and then I go, Mom, did I just hit your boob? She goes, yes, son. I go, Mom, no disrespect, but it's really close to your stomach. And we just cracked up. Like we just cracked, just the bottom, right? Yeah. But it was so funny because all of a sudden I went, because I would always just go in and like, all right, point forward, whatever it is, boom. I'm watching, I'm watching Ted Lasso. I got to get back over there, Mom. Yeah. And she goes, I go, well, it's subcutaneous still, Mom. It's in. Yeah. Have a good night. I'll be back in an hour to check on you.
It'll still work. Exactly. It's funny. Awesome. I know how these things go full circle for sure.
They really do. I've learned that. The last few years for certain. For certain.
Mike, couple of thoughts here, kind of in closing. First and foremost, thank you, man. This has been way more insightful than I'd hoped, and just such a thrill for me. I very rarely, I don't say ever, but I rarely ever watch an episode. I can't wait to watch this and listen to this, so I can kind of really take it in for myself again. But I want to kind of give you the opportunity. I've never really done this either, but I would love to leave the outro to you. Any final words or anything you'd like to say?
You know what those are going to be. You know what my final words are going to be. First and foremost, you hit me up through Instagram, and I instantly said I'd love to. You are and this is true from the heart. You are as smooth and polished and well-spoken of anyone I've ever done a podcast with. So continued success, John, because you got your looks, you're a handsome wrestler, you're a dad, you get it, you're well-spoken, you have fun, you let me ramble a little bit. I always joke, Joe always went on so much, I'm trying to catch up. But you're excellent at what you do. Somebody said to me a while back, like, Goldie, if you get these requests and you don't acknowledge them, then you're cheating somebody starting out of a gift that was given to you 20 years ago in your career when Bill Clement, whatever it was, gave me a chance. So that's not as particular to you, but that's why I hit you back right away. Glad to do it. This has been as pleasant a surprise for me as it's been an impressive time together for you, because it's been a blast and you're great at what you do. You got to see my new set, which turned out great. I literally was putting up pictures this morning going to my wife, Fernanda, all right, I got to get these up. She's like, babe, I'm on a conference call. No, get the leveler. So you got to see my new setup, and I can see it. It looks good. Yeah. And I guess the only way to finish this episode of The True Story with John Gibson is, it is all over, just like